to, thank you, and also how to write a case study. So today we want to focus more on messaging. So messaging is a core component of advocacy. Everything that we are trying to do, essentially, we're trying to communicate. In most organizations, actually, the advocacy officer is also the communications officer. Yeah, because the two go hand in hand. They move together. So if you want to be an effective advocate, you need to be effective at message creation. You need to be good at creating messages. I know that we on this call have different levels of knowledge and experience in terms of creating our own messages. Every day when you speak or type or whichever way, or sign, if you use sign language, you are designing and delivering messages. And those messages, of course, have a particular goal or objective. You know what you want to achieve. And most times when we are communicating, we're either trying to express and explain what we mean or convince someone to take up a course of action that can make our lives better and even their lives better. And that's the same concept behind advocacy message development. So to start us off, I'll share a little bit more about advocacy message development, and we'll walk through just some guidelines in terms of how to create effective advocacy messages. I'm also very keen to hear your own experiences as you've been conducting your programming. What are the things that you've found to be important if you want to create a compelling or convincing advocacy message? So to start us off, we will try and explore a bit about what an advocacy message is to begin with. So the goal of advocacy message is to motivate. The goal is to motivate. And you're motivating a target audience to act on a desired path to change. If I could just say, you know, advocacy messaging, this first bullet point captures the essence of what advocacy messaging is about. So we've already discussed the importance of identifying your primary audience, which is the audience that can directly influence the issue. Secondary audience, which is the audience that can influence the primary audience. And yesterday, in terms of policy briefs, we spoke about targeting to make sure that you're right for your target audience. And you can have different messages for different audiences, different primary audiences, different secondary audiences, because all of them need motivation so that they can act and support your mission, which is your desired path to change. If you want a policymaker to write or to table a new motion in Parliament, what message will you design and deliver? How can you motivate them to want to take action? If you want the community to sign a petition that supports a particular program, same question. What messages will you design to motivate them to want to act according to what you desire? So this is about influence. It's about influencing change by influencing people to act for change. An advocacy message, it's a core statement that helps you to define your advocacy mission to the public and to different target audiences. So in our action planning, advocacy action planning, we spoke about the importance of setting your objectives. So what is it that you want to achieve? Yesterday, we said goals referred to the long-term intended impacts. And then we said the objectives refer to the short-term results that you are looking forward to. These just can be short-term outcomes. Sometimes they can even be outputs, in even more shorter term, immediate, term. So what we are saying is an advocacy message is used to help you communicate those objectives to the public in a convincing way. Advocacy messages are not expected to include all information about the topic. It's not supposed to cover every detail, but it's supposed to include the most important components that can help a person understand so they can make an informed decision on whether or not to act. So just to remind us all, please, if we're not speaking at the time, just make sure you mute. I see, Joven, your mic is on. Just remember to mute unless you are sharing a point within the session so that there are no disruptions. The third point I want to highlight is an advocacy campaign message is important so you can help people understand what you are about and what you want to accomplish. So you also need to explain who you are as an actor. Why should they pay attention to you? What is it that you want to accomplish? And of course, how can they contribute towards the mission that you are trying to accomplish? An advocacy message also translates an issue into a concise and compelling case for targeted audience. So that's a summary of everything that I have shared. So I want to ask you a question now. And it's good to see different members coming in. I see Joven, you've joined. I see Jerry's joining as well. So now I have a question. What are the characteristics of a convincing message? What are the characteristics of a convincing message? I'd like to know what your thoughts are. What do you think are the characteristics of a convincing message? So if someone is to come to you and to convince you to do something that you are not preparing to do, how would they need to package their message? So that's the question I need your response on before we move on with the session. So give it some thought. Give it some thought. If you want to share, just unmute your mic or write in the chat box. Let's discuss. What are the characteristics of a convincing or a persuasive message? I can give you an even quicker or easier. Oh, I see Arnold. Arnold, you've got your, you've unmuted. Please go ahead. Arnold, do you have something to share? Maybe while we wait for Arnold. Emmanuel says it must be clear and it must be logical. Huh? It must be clear and logical. Newton says it must be precise, concise, backed up with evidence, with a clear ask or request. Yes. Yeah. I feel like we can even finish the session on this particular question because these are all essential elements of a convincing message. I'm going to be a bit controversial. Let's say you were there's someone that you like, someone that you are attracted to. Maybe this is something you've done in the past and you wanted to propose to them. So to let them know how you feel and ask them to be your partner, how would you need to package that message? How would you need to package that message? Maybe that can help us also share more thoughts. George says it must have a targeted audience. Yes, definitely. It must have a targeted audience. I want to check from Jerry, from Arnold. We haven't yet heard from you on this question. Like what are the characteristics of a convincing or persuasive message? Joven, we're also keen to hear from you as well. Feel free to write in the chat or to unmute. What would you say are the characteristics of a convincing message. So far, we have clarity, logical, precise, concise, back to the evidence, clear ask or request with the targeted audience. Arnold says it must avoid ambiguity. So it mustn't be difficult to understand or interpret. So it goes back to the point on clarity. So it seems we're really focusing on clarity. You know, there must be a clear ask. The audience must be clear. Jerry says they must have a call to action, must be credible. That's important. That's important. If you're trying to get people to act on something, they want to know, who are you? Why should we listen to you? You know, and also, is your message real? Is it directly referring to an issue that exists? Is it a credible issue? You know, Chauvin, you say it's there should be a clear vision. There should be smart objectives, yes, aimed at solving the problem. So clarity keeps coming back. Clarity keeps coming back. Action, you know, a clear ask, call to action, that's important. Credibility is coming up as well. So it must be backed up with evidence that's coming through. The clarity piece also, there's a mention of it being logical. Arnold says the language of the intended audience, even the use of local language of the audience. Yeah, so that goes back to the issue of clarity. So it seems we have the most agreement on the concept of clarity. It must be clear. It must be easy to understand. It must have a call to action. It must be credible. So it has to be backed by evidence and be a realistic issue that the person can relate to. So yeah, I don't think we'll have to do much then for the rest of the session, because it seems we have quite a lot of, you know, very important information about advocacy messaging already. So I'll just add on, you know, to some of the areas that you've already spoken to. It's important when you are creating your advocacy messages to set advocacy goals and advocacy objectives. So Jerry says, what about relevance? That's true. The message has to be relevant. So it must be relatable. So the person who you are speaking to must feel connected to what you are talking about. Otherwise, they will not be interested in acting on the issue. So you also have to help them understand what do they stand to benefit or to gain from this issue or from the action that you're asking them to take. Why should they care? Why should this issue matter to them? So relevance is important. So thank you for for highlighting that as well. So I was speaking about the importance of setting advocacy goals and objectives. So you need to have a clear goal, and that should be the message that you lead with. Maybe your goal is, we want to eliminate child marriage in our country. That's the goal by 2025, with particular attention to these provinces that have the highest rates of child marriage. And we want to reduce it by 50% through a change of laws. You know, the more specific you are, the more realistic the goal seems, the more relatable it becomes. People can actually see it coming to life. It should also be exciting. You know, people, when they hear of the goals and objectives you have, it excites them. It helps them to understand that, you know what, I think this seems to be a mission that is bigger than one person, that I could also, you know, have an opportunity to contribute to. So be clear about what you want to achieve and the change you want to see. We spoke about setting goals and objectives. We're very clear about that. So the more clarity you have generally about your advocacy goals and objectives, the clearer you will be able to communicate that to partners. Also, you need to be clear about how you propose to achieve your goals and objectives and the action. We spoke about this earlier, the action that you want your audience to take. So as you explain the objective, it must be clear to the audience where they fit. What role can they play in the achievement of that objective? Right. So Another key point around messaging, someone said it has to be targeted. You need to have a target audience. That's true. So you have to know your audience so that you can speak to your audience in the right way. You can talk to 3 people, but I assure you, you can't talk to them the same way. One maybe might listen to you for 3 minutes without interrupting you. Another, you start to speak 10 seconds later, they're stopping you and they're saying, hey, I don't have time, be quick. And now you have to adjust. You have to understand your audience in advance so that you can tailor your messages to meet their needs. So tailor to each particular audience. That makes it more effective. Some of the questions that you can try to explore to understand your audience better is, who are you talking to and why? Why have you targeted this individual? And who are they? Where do they come from? What constituency are they in? What are their interests? You can ask yourself, who will be influential for my cause? So who are the most important people? Primary, secondary audiences. We spoke about this yesterday. When you've identified these people, ask yourself, what are their values? Sometimes you can interview or ask certain people to say, hey, we want to meet this member of parliament, but we don't know much about them. We saw that you worked with them on that campaign. What are their values? Sometimes you can, these days, people have even personal websites, constituency websites, and they already write down the things that they value. Or go online, Google that individual, check for news articles where they say something about this issue or that issue, and it can help you understand more about the things that they care about. If you're looking at parliamentarians, go into the parliament minutes, the parliament Hansards, and look for the name of that individual and see how they debate and what they debate on. It can help you to identify the issues that this person is interested in. Sometimes you can also set up an informal chat to get to know this individual better before you go to them with an advocacy ask, so that you can get more information about them. You also need to find out what media do they consume. Where are they most active? Do they follow more of the print media, so the newspapers and online news gazettes? Are they more of a social media, person? Do they watch a lot of TV and radio? So when you start to identify the media habits of your target audience, it helps you to tailor your approach to their needs. So let's say, for example, I would say in Zimbabwe, close to 60% of the population live in rural areas. So if I'm trying to run an advocacy campaign that is supposed to generate public support for an issue, then I have to ask myself, the 60% or the majority of the population, how or what type of media do they consume? And I'll know, they consume a lot of radio, related content. For those with smartphones, they get a lot of information via WhatsApp, from different groups forwarding, information to them. Maybe which social media platform, a lot of them might just be starting on and using a lot of Facebook because it's not, data heavy. So I'm already trying to identify, based on the people I want to talk to, where can I reach them? People don't gather that much, physically anymore, but they gather a lot more in the online spaces. So, and each space is different. So you have to identify, where to reach them. I already spoke about lifestyle issues. So that connects with the values that you are interested in. We also need to ask ourselves, how will we motivate them to act? What tactics can we use? What messaging can we use? What issues can we highlight? What values can we focus on? That's what you're trying to answer. We also need to find out what they already know about the issue. Sometimes in advocacy campaigns, you can conduct surveys that help you gauge the knowledge levels and the attitudes of the populations that you are reaching out to. These surveys, companies use that also. They do brand perception surveys. So they go out there, they send people to ask, maybe it's Coca-Cola. When was the last time you drank Coca-Cola? Maybe it was last year. which drink, was the last drink that you had? I drank water the other day. Okay. So why is it that you've stopped, taking this beverage and so forth? What you think about the brand Coca-Cola, which other brands compete? You're gathering information, right? So brands do that about brand perception. Now, when we talk about advocacy, we want to understand, what do people already know about the issue that you were talking about? So that, there are people who don't know anything. There are people who know a little bit, but not enough. There are people who know, some information, but don't agree with the approach that you have. There are people who, know the information and already support the approach that you have. So this is about segmentation of audiences. And the best way to be able to segment audiences is by collecting data. So you understand more about your audience and then can classify and then come up with specific messages for each target audience. So when you look at like behavioral change models and so forth, you'll be trying to carry people from one end of the spectrum to a desired end, right? So you can use some of that thinking as you approach advocacy. What we want is for everyone to want to act, or for a significant proportion of our target audience to be prepared to act on the issue. So we have to find out, where are they in their journey towards accepting the need for them to act, and then we tailor messages for them. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but if you have questions on it in terms of segmentation of audiences and so forth, do let me know. We can also make sure we provide more information on that as you start to think about your messaging. So lastly, look at, do they have demonstrated opinions on the issue? Does their history suggest a bias or position, on this issue? So all of this, you need to study your audience. I would say spend more time answering these questions for your primary audiences, and don't spend that much time for the secondary, because the key people you need to move are your primary audiences. Right. Do we have any questions on this, or we can move on? Do we have any questions so far? If there are none, you can type in the chat box. It's hard for me to tell if there's no response. So do we have questions so far? Jerry says we can move on. There's a thumbs up here. Okay. All right. So yeah, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, or unmute your mic, and we discuss. So this is what I asked you about after we just gone through slide 1. I asked about the characteristics of a strong advocacy message, or a persuasive advocacy message. And you've already spoken about a lot of these elements. So there are 3 main characteristics of an advocacy message, a strong advocacy message. It should be informative, persuasive, and action-oriented. So give people sufficient information on the issue, persuade them to be willing to act, and persuade them that your matter is important and that they are important in responding to it, and then include a call to action. So it should be actionable. The person should be able to see clearly what they need to do and can do on the issue, and when they need to do it. There are other characteristics beyond, these which have been mentioned, which include it must be emotive. So it must trigger a response from the individual. They have to feel something. They can feel excited. They can feel sad. They can feel worried, anxious. They can feel angry. People remember things that made them feel a certain way. So the way you package your information and the type of information you include, make sure that it is emotive. It gets people to feel the need to act, and to feel sometimes even in solidarity with people who are being affected by the issue. Make sure that they also there are certain, for example, anger. Anger is a very powerful emotion, so injustice, when you share information that lets people see, no, people are not being treated fairly. There's an injustice that is being suffered. You can trigger feelings of anger, and anger is a very powerful tool in advocacy, because when people feel strongly about something, then they are motivated to act. So George says, is there any differences in designing the advocacy message based on the advocacy channels? So social media versus demonstration? Yes, definitely. But the first level of disaggregation is according to the target audiences, right? So you start off by understanding your target audiences, understanding their media trends. Where do they consume information? How do they consume information? You package your messages, and then you adapt them to the channels, the media channels that you want to use to reach out to them. Some are short form, some are visual, some are conversational, more conversational. Different platforms have different needs, but you don't get to the channels until you understand the media patterns, media consumption habits of your target audience. So it's a step-by-step process. But the quick answer is yes, there are differences. The more targeted your message is to the individual, to the platform, the more likely it is to succeed. So that actually is the third bullet there, which is a strong advocacy message is personalized. It's personalized. Imagine if someone wanted to invite you to their wedding, but they don't send you an individual invite. They just put a post on Facebook and say, by the way, my wedding is on this date. If you want to come, come. If you don't want to come, don't come. That's very depersonalized. Maybe they really want you to come, but they are not motivating you because they're not having a conversation with you. They're just throwing information at you and hoping that you can, decide for yourself what you're going to do. But if you really want the person to come, you write their name, you print a card or an email, or send an email, you write their name, you give them specific information. You are cordially invited, to my wedding on this date, starting from this time to that time. This is the dress code. If you'd like to come, these are the directions. Send a message to this number. That's the call to action. Send a message to this number if you'd like to come for the wedding. That's personalized. We do that for our own private things. So we have to do that also for advocacy, because you are reaching the same human beings. We love things that are personalized, that are targeted, that focus. And as I said, let's make sure we spend a lot of that time personalizing information for our primary audiences. A lot of these other things we've spoken about, they must be actionable. There must be a clear call to action. It mustn't be hidden somewhere in the subscript. It must be clear. This is what you need to do. Sometimes you can even make it bold. If you're writing and it's on a poster, that call to action must be there somewhere, even at the bottom. So those are things that are important to consider. It must be understandable. It must also be structured. So you must have a primary message, secondary message, and so forth. Different messages for different target audiences. Lastly, it must be memorable. So, of course, make use of visuals as well. So engage the senses. So let people experience what you are talking about. Some people will use drama. They'll go to a commemoration event or a government meeting, and they'll act out a drama that shows that this issue it needs to be acted on. And that dramatization becomes a memory. Sometimes you can use slogans. Yeah, you can come up with taglines. So people will always remember, whenever we are talking about this is what it's about. You brand your campaign. You have brand colors. You can even have brand icons and even characters. Go as far as you can, because it depends also on how long-term your advocacy effort is going to be and the role which public perception will play. The more people you need to reach, the more careful you need to be about the way that you brand your campaign, so that you are consistent, and so that whoever sees it for the first time and sees it for the 7th time, they'll still be able to capture and remember the messages. So when you finally ask them to act, it's not that difficult for them. Another thing to be mindful of is the power of reinforcement, positive reinforcement. That's an important communications tool, so to speak. When you have your messages, and this goes to the delivery of the messages, it helps if you use different channels to reinforce the same message. So of course, be consistent, but also be consistent across different channels. So when someone is in a matatu, traveling from point A to point B, they see your banner on the road, maybe along Ngong Road. They see a banner that says, we must change the age of consent laws for access to services. And it's called the Youth Care Campaign, #YouthCare. And then they're at work, they go online, it's lunch break, they're on social media, and they see celebrities are endorsing #Youth Care Campaign. What's the main message? We must change the age of consent laws, for SRHR, access to SRHR services. And then they go home, and then their young sister from school is like, there are people that came, peer educators were telling us that we need to advocate for our rights, and they spoke about the Youth Care Campaign. What are you doing? You are reinforcing. So consistency in messaging is important as you go to different platforms. The key elements of your message must remain the same, but then the way you deliver can change according to the audience. I hope that makes sense. Right. So now we move to more practical steps in terms of the packaging of advocacy messages, So I'm going to focus on five things that I think can be very helpful for you as you package your information. The previous slide, where I've just come from, this one, in the guideline document that we share, we provide more information on all of these, informative, emotive, and we describe what we mean by these. But for the purpose of this session, I thought, let me spend more time unpacking how to package advocacy messages, and pardon the pun. So the first thing we'll focus on is the triage of problem, solution, action. Problem, solution, action. So it's advised that you spend a little bit of time describing the problem, but you spend the bulk of the time describing the solution and the action. There are always problems. In Africa, there are so many problems. And when you get into public transport, even if you're driving and you listen to the radio, even on your own, our problems are very near. Very near and dear to us. And it's very tempting to focus your messaging on explaining this is a problem because it's like this, and the world is ending, and there's this crisis, etc., etc. But problems don't motivate people to act, because everyone has problems. So what motivates people to act is the existence of solutions. Spend more time engaging the individual's imagination for them to see that there is a solution, and for them to see themselves as an actor that can solve the problem. So yes, describe the problem you're trying to address, but emphasize the proposed solutions and describe how the audiences can help in achieving the objectives. The next piece is choose your channels and your platforms. And I know we've spoken about some of these things, but I've just to reiterate a few points. I said, use as many platforms as possible. Reinforce the messages. Consider multiple platforms that include face-to-face, email, online, media placement, social media. But in all you do, adapt your messages to suit each platform. So this is also a response to the question that was asked. Then you choose reliable spokespeople. This is especially if you have face-to-face interactions, or let's say you are recruiting an ambassador for your issue. Maybe you're recruiting an ambassador, a child marriage ambassador, anti-child marriage ambassador. But then this ambassador is known, for being very tricky character. Maybe they've had cases or in the courts around statutory rape and so forth. So their reputation is not strong. So sometimes the message is good, but the messenger is wrong. You can sometimes borrow or inherit the negative perceptions of an individual in your campaign, even when you're trying to work with them to advance positive messaging on an issue. So be very careful. Your message is only as strong as the messenger. Your message is only as strong as the messenger. The two cannot work in separation. They work together. So choose effective spokespeople who are credible, eloquent, and convincing communicators, whether it's online or it's in person. Make sure that the person who's handling the message development and message delivery is a person who's credible, eloquent, and can convince the target audience. So they must be people that support the advocacy goal. You know, you can, celebrities normally just want money sometimes. They write, there'll be a rate card that says, right, for me to tweet something for you on my platform, you must pay $800. For me to put a reel on my Instagram for 24 hours, you must pay $1,200. So you pay them 800, they put a tweet. You pay them 1,200, they put the Instagram reel. They don't engage on the issue. They don't care about the issue. All you're doing is you're blasting people with information without a credible messenger. So your message is unlikely to be received or treated with importance. So be careful. That individual should also represent the required level of authority. You know, you can't have someone who is from a completely different field and has absolutely little or no knowledge on the technical knowledge on the issue to stand and speak on behalf of the issue. Also, if you are trying to represent the interests of a particular group, it really helps to make sure that the representatives of that group are also at the forefront of delivering the advocacy messages. Also, make sure that they have influence with the target audience. So some of these messengers can be part of your secondary audience. We said the secondary audience are people that can influence the primary audience. So you identify actors. Normally we have allies in the CSO space, in the UN space. We have members of parliament that already support the issue. We have traditional leaders who are already activists, you know, supporting the issue. Work with them. They are the ones who have the capacity to influence their peers and other people who might be even under their authority. So lastly, of course, spokespersons should be confident, clear, engaging, thoughtful, attentive, and convey urgency. Being a good communicator is not something you are born with. Of course, you know, most babies, when they are born, they can scream or cry or fiddle. They try to communicate their needs anyway. So everyone is born with the capacity to somehow, in some way or another, express displeasure, express pleasure. So becoming an effective communicator is something you can learn. So when I say these things, please also see yourselves as spokespersons, potential spokespersons. And the things that we are identifying are areas that you can strengthen so that you can be an effective messenger of your advocacy message. So you should work on your confidence. Confidence normally can come from competence. You know, confidence can also come from experience. Confidence can come from alliances, you know, with people who give you or share their strength with you, or who speak on your behalf to say, you know what, you can trust this person. So when you step into a space and someone else has endorsed you, that confidence can come. Read more about the issue, understand, you know, the facts about what you're trying to deal with. Also ensure that your countenance, you know, sometimes little things, you know, comb your hair, be clean, when you are preparing to, address these individuals. Eliminate areas that can, make you feel less confident about yourself, because any lack of confidence you have will affect the reception of your message. In terms of being clear, we spoke yesterday about, like, when you write a case study, ask someone else to read. You can write what you want to say. You can write the message ahead of time. You can rehearse with someone, and they can help you be clearer in how you deliver what you deliver. In being engaging, you need to learn to ask questions, be inquisitive. So before you go for that meeting, write a list of questions you would like to ask to ensure that the person you're targeting is engaging on the issue, is also, responding to your questions, and invite them to also ask questions. Be thoughtful. So the more time you spend on the issue, the more time you spend reading and so forth, it opens your mind to so many other, pieces of information. And it can be easy for you to be more thoughtful in your responses when questions are asked, because you don't just know what's on the advocacy brief or the advocacy message, but you know more about the issue and can respond, to deeper questions on certain issues. Be attentive. Of course, that goes without saying. Pay attention. If you're sitting down and having a meeting with someone, turn the phone off. Get a notebook if you can. Write down, so you can remember what they are saying, so you can respond also with accuracy. And lastly, you need to be able to convey urgency. But it's hard to convey urgency if you personally don't believe in the issue, if you don't believe that it's important to act on. So you must also be passionate about what you're talking about. If you have no passion, you will not be able to convey passion or urgency. If you have no passion about the issue you're talking about, don't talk about it. Get someone else who's got the passion, who can be able to focus attention on the issue. Then we need to test and refine messages. So I spoke to you about reaching out to people from the target audience and inviting them to respond. And you can use online tools to measure the response and the impact of the message. So there are lots of online tools, especially around social media, impressions tracking, and so forth. It can help you see the sentiment. The sentiment, as in, is it a positive sentiment? Is it a negative sentiment? Which population groups are engaging the most? And yeah, it helps if you can track, because then you can adjust the messages. You might find that, hey, some of the messages we're sending are not getting the type of response, but some of them they are. So what do? You look at the ones that are successful. You identify the characteristics that you believe are making them successful. And then when you write new messages, you include those components that make people engage more. Maybe people engage more with statistics. Maybe they engage more with content that has a video. Maybe they engage more with content that had that call to action. Maybe it's sign a petition, So keep learning, keep refining, keep testing. Based on feedback and data, as I said, you adjust the message. Your goal is to be effective. Effectiveness means your goal is being met. So if it's a call to action, how many people are acting as a result of the message? So if it's a petition, how many people are clicking the petition versus the number that have seen, the post or the message or heard the message on the petition? If it's not working, you change and you see, okay, are the numbers increasing? Also persuasiveness, right? So you want to see if people are really engaging with the topic and are really connecting with it. Are you persuading them? Are they being motivated to want to act? Your key messages should be adapted over time and to reflect changed attitudes and circumstances. I told you about the journey as you segment your audiences. So audiences move from you want them to act on this side. So they move across a spectrum of beliefs and attitudes. Some might not yet be ready. Some might be ready. Some might be almost ready, but need more information. So you keep changing as your audience changes. The only way to tell that is to keep checking, keep analyzing. So that includes checking your impressions data, like for online platforms. You can keep sending out a survey, to the same group and to see, are there changes? Are people responding differently? And you keep adapting as you go. Right. So then we go to number 5. Number 5 is anticipate opposition. In advocacy is normally about disrupting the status quo. So disrupting the way the world is currently working. Advocacy is disrupting power, redistributing power, which means that the people who had distributed the power to begin with might take offense. It means the people who set the rules that you are trying to change might take offense. If you're trying to change laws or policies or introduce new norms, you have to accept the reality that there are people who will not agree with you. And our politics in the world generally is heavily polarized. In our own countries, it is heavily polarized. You know that there's a ruling party, there's an opposition party, and sometimes they'll be saying the same thing. But because they are opposing each other, they always just have to fight. So just bear in mind, opposition will come. So consider what your target's likely defense will be and how to counter their arguments effectively. So the people that, for example, the opposition that you identify, consider how they will want to defend their position and determine how you will counter their arguments. So if you can do that ahead of time, even better. There are some tools that we've provided in the guideline document that will help you think more about how to address your opposition. So there's some boxes that can help you map, what are others saying about us? What are we saying about them? And how can we respond? So there are different tools. We've provided some of that. So you need to produce a checklist of likely arguments and how to counter them. Always try and understand your opposition and what they will say. Track. In most of our countries, I know there's been opposition to different things. I think Zambia, there was a push against CSE. Kenya, there was a big push against access to safe abortion. I remember with attacks on Mary Stopes and even on CSE. Tanzania, there's generally, not been a lot of support for still, access to safe abortion. CSE is still relatively difficult to get, support on. There are groups that actively oppose, some of these agendas. In some countries, it's more pronounced, in others, less so. So we need to understand the opposition. Now, here is one of the tools that in the guideline document. So in the guideline document, it's an actual table, and there are gaps that you can fill. There are gaps that you can fill in response to these questions. But what I did is I extracted the main questions and I decided to put them here. So you just have an example of one of the tools that we've put in the document. So in the message worksheet, which is something I'm hoping we will all use and fill in. So we need to write, what is the goal? What are we trying to achieve in the long term? Then what are the objectives? And these are policy objectives, yeah? So what needs to change in the short term, policy-wise, in order for us to address the long-term goal? And then what is the key message? So this is the main message. As I mentioned to you, you can adapt messages for different audiences, but the core of your message must remain the same for consistency and reinforcement. And then you highlight, who is your audience? So your primary audience, especially. Why is this issue important to them? So in terms of importance, you can even write 3 bullet points at least that can help you, unpack answers to that question. And then what are your supporting points? So you've got your message, Now, what are your supporting points? Okay, we need to end child marriage through changing policies, etc. What are the supporting points? You can refer to evidence. You can refer to social norms, that support the change that you are driving towards. You can refer to people who have voted or who shared their perception on the issue and said, we want this change. You can even speak about the potential benefit of addressing this issue in terms of the development of the country, the constituency, and so forth. And then lastly, what examples, stories, or facts do you have to support your message? So in the guideline document that has been shared on this in advocacy messaging, there are gaps there that we will invite you to fill in so that you can respond to these questions and can create your own advocacy messages. So this is the technical content for today. Just as a reminder, these sessions are meant to help you understand the guidelines that we've shared or that we'll be sharing on advocacy planning. They are meant to provide an introduction to the key technical areas where you requested support, so that when you then go into the Google Drive folder and you read the guideline document and you read the other supporting tools, it is easy for you to navigate because the core information has been provided. My job today has been to provide some direction and to unpack essential concepts so that when you read the guideline document, you're not starting from scratch. Our goal also through this technical support is to help you deliver on the action plans that you developed at the end of last year and we finalized at the beginning of this year, so that you can design your own advocacy message. You can create your own policy briefs. You can conduct your own policy analysis. You can refine your advocacy plans. And then, of course, for tomorrow's session, you can also support training on monitoring the provision of youth-friendly health services. So this is the session for now, and we'll have the next session tomorrow. But before we move anywhere, I just want to check if you have any questions or comments on the content, or even experiences that you would like to share in terms of advocacy message creation. So it's over to you. Do we have any questions? We have Newton here, Arnold, George, Jovin, Jerry, Jacqueline, welcome. Asha, welcome. We have Emmanuel as well. Do we have any questions or any comments on the topic? Did the content? Oh, Emmanuel, please go ahead. I see you've unmuted.
Yeah. No, I have no question. Just a comment. The session was insightful. I think it was good to just have an in-depth on how best we can do our work. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the feedback, Emmanuel. Thank you, Jerry, as well, for your feedback. Is there any other feedback on this session? Maybe is there something that you appreciated knowing the most? Is there something that you wish you'd get more information on? Because we're here to support even beyond this session. If there's more information you think we should provide, more guidelines and guidance, we're here to support you. No further questions. Anything from the Y+ team? Jerry says it was smooth compared to the case study session. Yeah, some of the sessions can be a bit tricky. They can be a bit tricky. I think the policy analysis one was the heaviest because it's technically so challenging to convey, the key messages. But I'm glad you found this one to be better. Great. Anything from the Y Plus global team? All right, Arnold says the session was great. Thank you. Great. Thank you as well for joining. So yeah, no, I think it's a good point for us to call it a session and say we're done for today. If there are any questions, please do send an email. Let me do this actually. Let me just make sure you have this. Right, so that's my email address. You already have Ivy's email address, who's responsible for this youth care project. So do send, questions or even material that you think would be helpful to share with other members. Maybe you've created your own advocacy messages as an organization before on a certain issue and want to share those technical resources with other partners. Please do send that through. Right, so that said, thank you so much for this session and for making time for the questions and the information you've shared as well. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. Enjoy your Wednesday as well.